Hi, I'm Rabbi Shmuley, and welcome to the Sensual Revolution. What is kosher sex? Yes, it's a book that I published about 2 decades ago, and I hope that you read it, or at least bought it. But I wrote it because kosher sex is a thing. What thing is it? There's great sex and there's kosher sex. Great sex has you screaming the name of the deity during the act. Oh God! Kosher sex has you remembering the name of your partner the morning after the act. Great sex is the end to an encounter, but kosher sex is the beginning of a relationship. What do I mean by all these strange mutterings? It's simple. Kosher sex is where sex takes two halves and unites them as a whole to become one indivisible object. Bone of one bone, flesh of one flesh. Kosher sex is transformative sex. It's sex that brings forth the strings of the emotion so that the act of sex, the sewing of these two garments, as it were, leads to them feeling connected afterward because sex led to an emotional bond that continues well after you separate physically. Physical separation is no excuse for emotional separation. And sex is that incredibly intense thing that we engage in that has the power to summon forth our deepest emotions so that we do feel intimate and we do feel connected. Let me just review for a moment some of the possible scenarios about what sex is about. I mean, sex is this overwhelming primal instinct, and it's so powerful. It can be used for very beautiful things like lovemaking. It can be abused for very terrible things. So what's its purpose? Well, if you ask a Catholic, and sometimes if you ask an evolutionary biologist, they might be in complete agreement as to the purpose of sex. What is sex? Procreation. In the Catholic Church, sex producing babies is vital because sex is a procreative instinct that is meant to lead to an offspring. It's one of the reasons that the Catholic Church is opposed to all forms of contraception that are artificial. They will endorse natural contraception, like the rhythm method. You know the joke. What do you call two people practicing the rhythm method? Parents. That's just a joke, but it speaks to how opposed to contraception the Catholic Church is. That makes sense because in Catholicism, sex is for having children. But for an evolutionary biologist, the same is true. Sex is part of an instinct that leads us to the widest possible distribution of our gene pool. Some evolutionary biologists might even believe that love is some kind of myth. It's some kind of false emotional inducement that makes us think we feel something for a man or a woman, when in truth, it's just our bodies trying to copulate so that the human species achieves continuity. If you go to someone who's more hedonistic in today's culture and say, what's the purpose of sex? They'll say, fun, pleasure, recreation. There's a big problem with that, however. The problem being that when you make love to someone or have sex with someone who doesn't call you back, who doesn't respect you, you could feel really used. Even if it felt great during the act, it could feel pretty darn awful after the act. I know a lot of women who meet guys and go to bed with them and the guy doesn't call them afterward, and they try to bury the memory. It may have been fun while it lasted, but it's not something they even want to share. Sometimes they even feel ashamed or they feel used. So sex is recreation? I don't know, a lot of question marks. Then there's the third category. Sex for intimacy. Sex as an act of connection. That's what the Bible says, and that's kosher sex. Genesis 2:24 captures it so beautifully and so romantically. It might just be the most beautiful thing ever said about sex. Therefore shall a man leave his father and leave his mother. He shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall become one flesh. He shall cleave, a clear sexual euphemism, in order that they become one flesh. No mention of babies. Not that sex should not lead to babies. I love kids. I'm the father of 9 children. I love big, beautiful, loving families. But that's not why a man and woman marry and make love. They marry and make love so that they cease being divided as two and they become unified as one. Now you begin to see the biblical metaphor in practice. Sex is an act of sewing, and as long as you have the emotional threads that remain afterward, you will feel like you're bone of one bone and flesh of one flesh. You will feel that the act has been transformative, that you haven't just engaged in the exchange of bodily fluids, an expression that I detest, or copulation. What kind of strange word is that? But you've been involved in lovemaking, and you remain in lovemaking, even after physical separation. That's why in the Jewish religion, sex is so vital. Are you aware of the fact that if a couple cease having sex, if they have a platonic marriage, it's still a marriage, but the life of the marriage is kind of dead. And it can even constitute causes for divorce or reasons to justify divorce, because you're not meant just to be best friends or bunkmates or roommates. You're supposed to be lovers. Kosher sex is passion that leads to intimacy. Interestingly, for those who believe that sex is only for procreation, I ask them, why do women, this is a question the Talmud asks, love sex while they're pregnant? Do you know that the human mammal is the only female that will accept a male when she's already inseminated and impregnated, which shows that the procreative side of sex is divorced from the pleasurable side? A woman who is pregnant wants to feel sexually connected to her husband. In fact, a lot of women whose husbands stop having sex with them once they're pregnant feel very offended. What, I'm not attractive anymore? This is our baby. Are you saying that body shape and size as it changes makes me less attractive? That could be profoundly defeminizing when a man treats a woman in that bad way. Also, women who are postmenopausal still love sex, which shows you that the pleasurable side and intimate side of sex transcends its procreative dimension. You know, there are people who ask, and I'm speaking about scientists, who focus on the simple question of why is the male sexual appendage disproportionately large compared to other mammalian species. Take a gorilla. Its mass is 600 odd pounds on average, but its sexual appendage is much smaller than the average human male. It turns out that size does matter. So why? The answer is that the large male sexual appendage, larger than almost any mammalian species, and here I'm being serious as opposed to trying to be humorous, facilitates and enables face-to-face sexual relations. In the animal world, almost all copulation, insemination, impregnation takes place back to front. So it makes almost no difference who the female is. You're not looking into her eyes, you're not looking at her specific facial features. But among us humans, a man and a woman, husband and wife, can practice eyes open sex. They could make love, they could kiss because of something that we often disparage, the missionary position, thereby achieving what the Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism, calls a three-pronged form of unity during lovemaking. They can kiss, exchanging life breaths, as it says in the Bible, and God breathed into Adam the breath of life. They can peer into each other's eyes, and the eyes are the windows to the soul, thereby becoming one spirit. And finally, all their limbs and their body can be enmeshed, entwined, and entangled, thereby becoming one flesh. One spirit, one soul, one flesh. That is true sexual unity. That is authentic intimacy. And that is real kosher sex. I'm Rabbi Shmuley, and I hope you're continuing to enjoy the sensual revolution.